So for all of you at work, at home, lounging, relaxing, driving truck across the open road, those in hospital, those in prison, we visit you. This is Coast to Coast AM. We'll be right back. I like a troublemaker, and David Seaman is definitely a troublemaker. Independent journalist and frequent contributor to Business Insider. Check out his YouTube channel sometime. David Seaman Online, S-E-A-M-A-N. Oh, man, David, how are you? Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back on, John. Great to be here tonight.
Excellent to have you, sir. Well, so, you know, everybody's so jumpy about everything anyway, but there's nothing quite like an attack helicopter coming over your house in the middle of the night. What's going on out there? And how many cities is this going on in? What's up? I can't figure it out.
Sure. So there have been mainstream media confirmed reports, both in Miami and Houston. But if you take to social networks like Twitter, it seems like people have experienced similar things in other areas. I've even seen reports from people in Hawaii saying that Black Hawk helicopters were circling the coastline at around the same time that the drills in Miami and Houston were occurring. And this is just a very quick summary from Jacob Sloan. This was an article on Disinfo's website, disinfo.com. He says, a swarm of helicopters hovered above Miami city center, and the sounds of machine gun fire filled the air at the same time as thousands of spectators exited a Miami Heat basketball game. The purpose on the military side was, quote, to prepare for some overseas activities and to ensure that, quote, equipment was in check. Police emphasized that this was only a drill, but the obvious question is, what was this a drill for? And too bad for any local residents who did not want to be unwitting participants in a military exercise. And that's really how I feel, too. I mean, a lot of government agencies, they will create fake towns, and they will pay actors to, be a part of the exercise. But these people are not paid actors. These are just, citizens trying to go about their business. And they look up, and there are Black Hawk helicopters firing blanks. And that's pretty startling. There are a lot of calls to 911 centers and to local media. And, of course, people weren't warned beforehand. And so what is this all for? What do you think of this, John? John?
I'm with you. Sorry, man. I think I stepped on my kill switch a little bit too hard, and it's stuck on the opposite. I'm going, what the H is going on? Could be a couple of things. One of them is, first two things that come to my mind are possibly gauging the reaction when this thing in Miami, that was after a Heat game, you say. So people were actually coming out of the place while this was happening? If that's
Correct.
the case,
according to this piece, that's exactly what happened.
Well, I see two benefits to such an outrageous gesture or exercise, whatever it might be, maybe both. Well, maybe three. Number one, let's see how they react. Number two, let's send a message. And number three, let's see how they react. Maybe in furtherance of, I don't know, maybe getting people used to it. There have been several reports over the last few months about, soldiers walking through neighborhoods and so forth, and they didn't give anybody a heads up that was going to happen. All of a sudden, the neighbors look out the window, and there's guys in combat gear walking around with their M4s.
Yeah, the gauging reaction thing is really fascinating to me because I was expecting much more of a reaction from this, but aside from, a couple of local news stations, the one in Miami and the one in Houston, there wasn't much reaction, so-called mainstream reaction. This passed by a lot of people, and people on Twitter who were, reporting this stuff. Other people are like, oh, you're just being weird. They're just running drills. It's no big deal. But, I've lived in America my whole life, and I don't remember any military helicopter drills when I was a child. And I think the lack of discussion is a little startling.
Well, it's all a little bit startling. In fact, there's a man that comes on the program. He's an economist and writes in newsletters, Joseph Meyer. We're going to get him on here in the next few weeks. And I was talking to him about money. And I just said, all right, default somewhere around July. He didn't really answer directly. He said, this debt is absolutely unsustainable. I don't know. I don't think anybody can deny that the agencies are getting ready for something. I'm not really sure if they even know what it is. I mean, they're only going to be told so much. They're just going to be told what to do. It's like policemen. They're not lawyers. They're policemen. And these folks flying and riding in these helicopters, they're not politicians, and they're not heads of these various security departments. They just do what they're told. So I'm not even sure they know what they're preparing for, other than it involves people.
And if they were firing blanks, which according to ABC 13 in Houston and Miami's WSVN, they were. So if they're firing blanks, what were they firing at? Was this a simulated drill in terms of like an attack drill? Like, what were they firing at? Were they firing at the sky? Was it just to get their troops used to the noise of machine gun fire in a crowded area? And also, the claims that this is to prepare for our overseas activities. The current combat zone that comes to mind is Afghanistan, and I'm sure your next guest knows a lot more about this than I do. But as far as I know, there are no cities in Afghanistan that even remotely resemble Houston or Miami.
Oh, well, that's for sure. Well, let me ask you this. Now, nobody likes to go on the record with something outrageous, so it's just a couple of guys talking here with a few million of our closest friends. What's the wildest thing? What's the wildest thing you can think of, David? What possible explanation could this be? The blank firing thing, that's all fine for drama and effect and so forth, but it seems to me that it's one thing to fly around and run a few maneuvers and set up your grids and, set up your partitions. But it's another thing to fire blanks. I'm just wondering, were they just, and they're, they like to have fun too. Did they just decide to make it wild, or what's the most angst we can suck out of this peach?
Sure. I have a couple of somewhat logical explanations, but I think the most extreme explanation, if we're just two guys talking to each other, is that there is a 60 to 70% chance of us going to war with Iran. And if that occurs, there could be widespread public unrest, and they might have to crack down in a very visible, showy way to prevent such protests from going nationwide. And so that's one theory. Another theory is similar to what you said from your economist friend, and that theory is that the dollar is going to be devalued at some point soon. And the reason why is because we're at $16.4 trillion of debt. And to give people out there an idea of how much money that is, Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, each one of those guys is worth approximately 50 to 60 billion. So if you're the richest man of the world, you can only pay 5% of 1/16th of what the United States owes right now. And so, one way to get out of that problem is to rapidly devalue our currency so we can pay back our creditors with dollars that are worth less. And you're going to have a lot of unhappy people when that happens because you're basically making people's savings disappear.
I think you've got a real point there. They'd be paying the debt back with cheaper dollars. Yeah, I can think of one particular outfit that would be very unhappy with this, and that would be China. Say, what's your take on this? I know you pay attention to these things. Why is it okay for us to be doing business with the communist Chinese? Why are we okay? Every time you see made in China on a product, you can pretty much go to the bank that it was made by slave labor. Why is that okay?
I think in order to remain competitive, a lot of companies are willing to deal with the devil. And, American consumers are a bit complicit in this also, because when you go to CVS or, the drugstore, you don't want to really pay $30 for a pack of razors. You want to pay $5 or $6. Then where do you think those razor blades are made? Or if you buy a laptop, you want to pay $300 or $400 for a 15-inch laptop. You don't want to pay $1,500, which is what it would cost if it were made by American labor. And I think that's part of it. Is it's purely a competitive thing, and it's the fact that consumers put up with it. If consumers started demanding that their products be made under humane conditions and made by people who have living wages, I think we would see things shift back to the United States.
Well, the thing about it is I just decided to take the last few days off from the angst, and I thought, I just need to disconnect and back away from this. I'll come back and check on it in a minute. And when I come back, well, yeah, otherwise you just wind up walking on the side of your head all day, every day. But the Senate Majority Leader up there says lawmakers should try to replace soon-to-be-implemented cuts to the Pentagon and domestic programs with alternative spending cuts and more tax hikes. So when you see military drills, the acquisition of all this ammo, which some of it is understandable and some of it is not, combined with high taxes, high prices, falling dollar, and grumpy China, should a default occur, well, I'm back to walking on the side of my head. I'll tell you what, let me take this little break, and we'll come back with David Seaman on Coast to Coast AM. David Seaman, hey, do you feel like taking a call? It looks like we got somebody here who's a copter operator, and you want to see what he has to say? Let's do it.
Sure, but really fast, just during the commercial break, one of my readers sent me something over Twitter. He said that he saw 5 single and 1 double blade choppers flying over his hometown in Arizona this morning. And he was on the way to the store when he noticed this stuff. He notes that there is an Air Force base somewhat nearby, but he said that he found it quite weird. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, this man's on the first-time caller line, so let's bring him on. Jay, are you there? Jay.
Hello?
Yeah, Jay, what's up?
Hi, how you doing? I just had a suggestion for your military aircraft. I'm active military. I'm a JTAC, a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, and what I do is coordinate, airstrikes. It uses pretty much any munition that hits the battlefield runs through one of us. And my suggestion was that we have areas that they're not ranges that we use, but they're civilian areas that we use for training, and we do simulated training. So what some of these people might be seeing is the guys out there controlling the aircraft. They use objects as targets. Aircraft are all unarmed, essentially.
Well, there were reports of blanks being fired and so forth. What's your take on that?
As far as the blanks go, I don't know why they have them in a civilian area, but I do know that whenever we can get a hold of them, we use them just as a training aid to kind of confuse and disorient the controller to get them used to that kind of situation. Okay,
well, now the other thing that got my attention was this thing in Miami was as a Miami Heat game was letting out. Is that your understanding, David?
Yes, that was what that news station WSVN had reported.
Yeah,
and, the encounter in Houston, I believe it was in southeast Houston, which is a high population density area as well.
Okay. Jay, you got anything to offer on that? It just seems the timing just seems a little odd. But sometimes things happen and the timing does seem odd, but there's really nothing especially premeditated about it. It's just, there's a Heat game on tonight. Well, this ought to be good. Let's let off some blanks. I mean, who knows?
I couldn't really speak to that. I don't know. I would think that they would stay away, from what I'm suggesting, those guys would stay away from the heavily populated areas, just so that they don't scare the populace. But I can't really speak to it. I haven't read or seen anything about what we're talking about. I just really wanted to suggest and let you know that I've done the training before. I'm still active, and I know that there's several other units out there that are active and do the same exact kind of training that we do. Especially for the folks down in Arizona, we do a lot of training down there. So. Okay,
gotcha. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to give us a ring, and appreciate your input. Thank you very much. Now, I don't know, David. People are going to be boys will be boys, and the girls will be girls, particularly if they're in uniform and they're carrying. But I don't know. It just seems like more and more military presence.
It's good for our troops to remain well trained to go through all of these scenarios just in case something happens on U.S. soil. But
yeah.
I think what has a lot of people alarmed is not just this one isolated thing or these couple of cities and these reports. It's just kind of the accumulation of all this non-transparent stuff we're hearing, and it's the accumulation of, you take into account NDAA, where they can imprison you without a trial if they need to. I know you've spoken with Daniel Johnson a bunch of times, and I'm actually speaking with him tomorrow on my program. But Dan and people like that, I think there is something going on here in terms of the American people are not really speaking out about anything. And even this helicopter thing, like, everybody's allowed to have an opinion on it, right? Can't somebody say that this is maybe not the best use of our taxpayer money, or this maybe isn't the safest thing to do? What if one of these helicopters malfunctions and it has to make an emergency landing? Where is it going to do that? On top of a bunch of Miami Heat fans? This is part of the reason why you're supposed to do these things out in the open, at least if you're a private citizen. You certainly would not do this in downtown Miami. So I think that I'm surprised that there's not more criticism, but it's good also to hear from somebody who actually works in the armed forces who can give us, his point of view as well.
Yeah, understood. Hey, Jesse, west of the Rockies out there in Phoenix, he saw 10 helicopters?
I did. Please, it's a pleasure to speak to you. I'm a high school teacher and a coach for wrestling, and we had a tournament today out in the Peoria High School, which is just about northwest of Central Phoenix. And I came outside to get a Gatorade out of my truck. And I'm a airplane enthusiast. And the weirdest thing happened. I was talking to the security guard about the weather. It's beautiful out here, 75 degrees. And I heard a womp, 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 womp. And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Look over your shoulder." There were 10 Black Hawk helicopters going from a west to south, obviously a northwest, so to a southwest direction. And there was a double-bladed Sikorsky, for lack of a better term, leading them. And I've lived there all my life. Luke Air Force Base, which someone alluded to, is the biggest fighter training base in the Western Hemisphere. And I've seen tons of jets. I've seen tons of helicopters. And I had never, ever in my whole life, I'm 37 years old, had seen so many helicopters traveling from California across Central Phoenix in my life.
And you've been out there your whole life, yeah?
My whole life. I'm a resident. I've lived here all my whole life. That was the whole back. I didn't even think of it until I was listening to your show tonight. And I said, "Holy cow, I saw that." And, I just it didn't register until I just thought about it. That's really unusual. You see 2 or 3 that will come from Yuma, which is a Marine base, that will always come from the southwest to northeast, because there's bombing ranges out there. Arizona has all the desert. They do so much training out here. But you don't see 11, 12 different helicopters coming. I mean, it shook the ground. It was so loud.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Mm-hmm. That something like that will definitely get your attention. Back in the old days, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you very much. Back in the old days, being a kid in high school, it wasn't unusual to see 6 or 8 Hueys coming over. But that's because Bell Helicopter that built them was right over there. So that was not, anything extraordinary, and they certainly weren't firing anything out the doors. That was a bit of a relief. I don't know. David, there's so much going on out there that nobody is, all we can do is get a local news report. And it seems like even when we do, within, I don't know, maybe a week or 10 days, the thrill is gone and people move on, and they don't. It just seems like a gradual, that old frog boiling in the gradually heating pot of water. He doesn't notice he's being boiled, but he is.
Well, if this is some kind of test, as some people have suggested, to gauge how the public responds to sort of a rapid militarization of urban areas, we did not pass the test. Very few people spoke out about this in any kind of critical way. Like I said, just a couple of news reports, then people on Twitter freaking out about it, but then very quickly other people would say, "Oh, you're just being weird, it's no big deal." And, if they are trying to acclimate us to increased militarization, they're doing a very good job at it. There's a lot of apathy out there. And I have to fly a lot, and I see how far we've come in terms of allowing our rights to be taken from us. You go to the TSA checkpoint, and it is honestly frightening. Even to somebody like me who's been through it 100 times, it's a little bit frightening. And I still remember, I'm old enough to remember what life in America was like pre-9/11, what a family vacation down to Florida was in the year 2000, and it was not this. It's not what we go through now in 2013 with the TSA checkpoints. And I know I'm kind of getting off topic, but I think it's all linked in a way.
Well, I agree with you. In fact, I spoke with some friends recently who had gone down to, a rustic part of the Southwest. And, they're U.S. citizens, and they were actually being harassed by, there were some Border Patrol people there. There were some state police there. Some of them were, they were definitely not friendly. But it almost seems like the citizens are getting a rougher time than people who are crossing back and forth across the border without permission. Let's just put it that way. It's just odd.
And it's the lack of transparency. If this is really happening all over the country in terms of this helicopter thing, why hasn't there been some in-depth thing on the evening national news about it? And the same with the NDAA. Why hasn't there been a national segment on this yet? It's been a long time. A lot of people are talking about it. Your show reaches millions of people. So why hasn't that trickled through yet? I feel like they're trying to keep some lines of conversation away from the so-called household dinner table. And so far they're doing a decent job of it. A lot of people still don't know about this stuff.
Well, I guess it's much more interesting to talk about Menendez and his preference in the allegations that are being made about his preference for underage prostitutes. That comes much closer to a reality TV show that we're being continuously bombarded with than anything else. But the other part is that there seems to be, for everything that's said that's critical of the mainstream media, somehow the mainstream media seems to have some sort of credibility that when it becomes absolutely undeniable, the mainstream media jumps into it, and then all of a sudden now we can listen en masse. However, until that happens, it's just more, fringe conspiracy talk. But as you said earlier, when you look at the behavior of the TSA towards citizens, really, what is the point in groping, body scanning and everything else, an octogenarian great-grandmother? Between that and all this money being spent with Department of Homeland Security. In fact, I heard the other day the Coast Guard is no longer a part of the Navy. It's part of the Department of Homeland Security. I want to look into that right now while we chat, because I'm just not really sure that that's true. But if it is, then it's almost like there's more effort being put in to contain the citizens of the country by the military that's supposed to protect it than against the actual outside aggressors, with the exception of Middle Eastern hot zones, which I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the degree of our involvement is there now.
When I'm in line at the TSA and, I'm having pseudo-federal agents shout at me to take my shoes off, and then, they pass me through a millimeter wave detection system or a radiation spewing backscatter radiation machine, X-ray machine, I don't feel safe, and I don't feel like my taxpayer dollars are going towards something that is beneficial. And I just this just came in on my Twitter thing about a minute ago, another report. My father and I saw 5 to 8 copters fly over really low over our house in northern Kentucky on Friday, shook windows. It was out of ordinary.
All right, so that's Arizona.
And that's the first one I've heard from Kentucky. So now we have, how many states is that? Kentucky, Hawaii, Texas, Florida, and then Arizona as well. So.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Let's see, Anaheim. Yeah, let's talk with Adrian. He's on wildcard line number 3 out of Anaheim, California. What's going on, Adrian?
How's it going?
Good. You seen helicopters flying around your neighborhood?
Yes, I've been seeing a lot of them, and I'm thinking that they're probably getting ready for martial law or some kind of civil unrest is going to happen in the country.
How many did you see, and how often?
I've been seeing them like almost every week, flying around Anaheim, Riverside, different cities. There's a heavy populated area. They just keep cruising around.
Well, we're talking about 2, 4, 6, 8, about more? How many are you seeing at a time in a flight?
Sometimes like 3, 4 in a row.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Appreciate your call. Thanks. A lot of stuff coming in from, now here's Hamilton, Ontario. Here's Jay on the international line. Let's talk to him for a second, David. Jay, what you doing?
Hey, I just call in to put it out there. Actually, about a couple months ago, I think November, I've actually seen a few Black Hawk helicopters flying around the downtown area of my city here where I live. And I've actually seen an Apache attack helicopter fly like straight over my head. And this has been going on for a few days, and they actually mentioned on the news that they were conducting counterterrorism exercises over buildings in the downtown core, and I just thought it was pretty strange, and there was no other explanation why. They just left it at that on the news, and that was it. So it's reached Canada as far as I know.
What do your friends say about this? The Canadians seem so mellow, and considering that our countries have been such good friends for so many years, I'm just wondering why we don't really hear more information out of our Canadian friends. What do your friends say about it? Is anybody concerned, or is it just business as usual?
Well, as far as I know, people around here anyways, just generally accept what the news has said and just okay and just turn a blind eye, just forgot about it and just moved on with their lives. And meanwhile, I was kind of concerned because there was no reason for any kind of counterterrorism exercises to happen in Hamilton because nothing's really here to actually warrant that. So I'm not really sure if anyone else actually noticed it because they were only complaining about noise for the most part, and that was just left at that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you very much for the call, David. It's been a quick hour. Give us your Parthian shot.
If I could very quickly, one more report just came in on Twitter. Somebody says, I live in Jacksonville, and 2 weeks ago, helicopters were circling around my town from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. at night, and that is not normal.
Ain't nothing normal. All right. What's next for you? What are you working on?
I'm still doing my show. Like I said, I'm having Daniel Johnson on tomorrow to help people how to, fight the NDAA at a local level.
Good.
And I'm just continuing to do, to speak my mind on things that I think are important because we are not a nation of followers, and our nation was not founded by followers. We were founded by people who looked at the details.
You're right.
Paid attention to the details. And we were founded by people who are not afraid to speak out and speak their minds, even if it seemed a little bit weird, And I think there's absolutely nothing weird about asking for more transparency as to what these drills are about.
I think you're right.
I don't think there's anything. I think there's nothing strange about that.
We got to bail, David, but we'll be back in touch.